Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the CBB SuperShow. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, aka the connoisseur of low major, mid major, aka the reporter / grinder of the transfer portal. It's been a while. Almost like 4 or 5 days since I've been on a live show. Really not a lot to talk about. Some busy personal life stuff for me, as you guys know, added to the family. But Final Four slate is upon us. Final Four games, whether you're betting on them, playing DFS, doing player props, prize picks, whatever it is, we are going to talk about it, and we are going to make some money on our final non-showdown slate of the season. It is very bittersweet. I'm going to miss this season, man. I really, really am. This has been a fun one. Being with FTN this season has been fantastic for me personally, getting to know so many great people and kind of expand the SuperShow brand. So I'm very excited about the future of that and looking to end this season with a bang. So I appreciate the continued support for everyone that keeps, watching my show, supporting it, smashing that like button, retweeting it, interacting with the show. Via questions in their live or on comments on YouTube. So thank you to everyone who continues to check me out. Been doing this since, 2013, 2014 on Blog Talk Radio. And it just is amazing that we've been able to continue on this long and people actually like it. So I do have plans throughout the summer to I'm going to be grinding, doing my thing with WNBA and CFL. It sounds like DK is not going to have AFL this time, which is Aussie football, which was a fun one to do. So I'm going to be grinding that. And if there's interest, I'll probably do some WNBA shows. But I'm also going to have dedicated shows to kind of talk about each conference teams through the transfer portal, recruits, turnover, all this good stuff within college basketball. I'm also going to start in the summertime a college football preview show. So I'm going to get you guys all the info there, talk about all the different teams, who to, gear up for, make some predictions for the upcoming football season. Very, very excited for the direction of the show, with DFS kind of wrapping up here. Have some plans for some actual guests outside of the DFS, universe, with some players, some possible coaches. Really, really excited. I'm not going to announce it yet, but there is talking to a couple of you privately about a potential guest that I've been talking with that is going to be a player. So I'm pretty excited about that. I really do hope it works out because that'll be fun for me, and I'll, be able to kind of, grow myself a little bit and work on my interviewing skills, I guess. And hopefully you guys will support that beyond just the DFS circle. I'm also going to have some Excel sheets out, kind of tracking each conference's transfer stuff so you guys can see who's coming and who's going. I really find that stuff interesting. I don't know how many of you also find it interesting, so I'm not sure if anyone will even look at it, but it'll be there, and I'll pin it to the top of my Twitter feed when I have it ready and done, so you guys can track that along and see what's going on. Final Four. The Final Four is here. We have the star-studded, blue-blooded Final Four after all this chaos. Number one seeds losing early. St. Peter's making this electric Elite Eight run. No 15's ever done it before. And after all of that stuff said and done, we end up with a North Carolina, Duke, Villanova, Kansas Final Four. So I'm not going to lie. I'm probably one of the few that would have preferred, a Cinderella in the Final Four, or a team like Houston or something. But yeah, I mean, this is, going to attract a lot more people and a lot more, will dabble in DFS and, boost the ratings in general. So really fun stuff. We're going to do the game by game, tried and true thing. There's only 2 games. So I will give my thoughts on each, talk about, where I see ownership going. I'll also kind of, talk a little bit about any bets, player prop stuff that I'm looking at there as well. Talk about PrizePicks, of course. I have, numerous PrizePicks on this one that I feel are pretty soft. And then we'll just wrap it up, with a couple cores for each site, FanDuel and DraftKings. Maybe talk a little bit about exposures. I have been doing the MME thing the last few slates. Actually had a really nice slate up with Houston. Hit a nice bink in the $1, which was pretty fun. doing the 150, which, is kind of abnormal for me, but I've been doing it and I kind of like it. Kind of like the MME thing, kind of makes you think a little bit differently. It's really hard to run one lineup on a 2-game slate, because if you miss, even one player, you're pretty much dead in the water. So we'll talk about all that stuff. Nice low key show. Not going to be too long. Probably, a little under an hour or so. I could obviously talk a lot about hoops, football, my life, anything in general, but I'll not bore you, and I'll get right to it. So let's dive in here, talk a little bit about this slate here, starting with the Villanova Kansas game. Also, by the way, my slate breakdown is up on FTN Daily right now. I'm going to do a little bit deeper dive here on the show, but you can use the article plus the show to kind of help you make your decisions and see where I actually, where I favor, who I'm prioritizing, all of that good stuff. So let's dive in. Villanova versus Kansas. We now have Kansas minus 4.5, a total of 133. Tempo rankings wise, Kansas 61st. Is very clashing styles here. Villanova 345th. So we know Villanova, they're going to want to play slow. Kansas is going to want to keep their foot on the gas and kind of run Villanova out of the gym if possible. I was on Thomas Viola's betting show earlier this week, where I did peg Kansas minus 4.5 as one of my favorite bets. I don't typically like to, take the favorite there as my favorite bet, but I'm having a hard time kind of picking Villanova to win this game. I am nervous because I don't want to pick against Jay Wright. Picking against a coach like Jay Wright usually isn't a favorable thing to do, but I just feel like Kansas is, they're playing on another level right now. Bill Self's got his stuff together. They have a really good lineup, and I think that they're overall, they are a little deeper than Villanova with the injuries that they have, and I think they'll be able to kind of win this one here absolutely outright and cover the 4.5. So that is one of my favorite bets. The total in the North Carolina game is my other one, which we'll get to in a second. Start with the obvious on Villanova. Everybody knows Justin Moore is out. Very, very tough injury for Nova to have. Justin Moore is one of their best on-ball defenders, which he doesn't get that kind of hype typically. One of their best scorers, obviously, a really key piece and a big part of their team that's not going to be around. So the big question this week has been, who's going to step in, who's going to get those minutes, what's Villanova going to do without Justin Moore? The obvious is that Caleb Daniels will just slide in there and get those minutes in that role. Now you'd like to think that, baby Archie will get some minutes, maybe Brian Antoine, but they don't really have a bench. And I think at this point, the consensus, and, I've been poking around and I like to support others' content. And, when I see stuff or people posting on Twitter, I like to see what everyone's saying. It does seem like the consensus is that Villanova is just going to attempt to play their starting five, which consists obviously of Colin Gillespie, Jermaine Samuels, Caleb Daniels, Eric Dixon, and Brandon Slater, and just run that starting five, 37 to 38 minutes. Now that's going to assume that Eric Dixon isn't going to get into foul trouble. Brandon Slater not into foul trouble. They're going to have to rely on these guys. Jermaine Samuels, who is definitely known to get into foul trouble, and rely on these guys to play. And I'll be curious if Jay Wright, if anybody gets too early, if he'll just play them through it and tell them to, back off, or if he will have to dip in there and play, Archie Didacono, or maybe a Brian Antoine instead and go really small. Kansas is a team that you can go small against because Bill Self inexplicably, in my opinion, will not stay big when he has the advantage. He'll just match the other team small. And I get it. David McCormick is incapable of stepping out and defending, stretch 4, stretch 5s in the pick and roll. He's too slow to guard it. I understand that completely, but it still doesn't make a ton of sense, especially on the offensive side, to not just have McCormick out there, maybe hide him a little bit on defense when possible, throw him down on the block on offense, and let somebody like, Caleb Daniels have to guard him if Slater or Dixon's in foul trouble. Like, come on. Against Miami, McCormick, who played 18 or 19 minutes, he had damn near 20 fantasy points because every time they got him the ball on the block, it was an easy turnaround, made bucket. And then the game got a little too fast for him. I get it. But if they can hide him at all, McCormick, whose price is very cheap, and we're going to get into the Kansas side here in a minute, it just floors me that he doesn't play more, especially on the offensive side. And I know it's not always possible to be like, hey, timeout, let's play him on offense, only not defense, but there has to be a way to exploit that matchup. But he's Bill Self. Obviously, I'm Walter Waddell, and he's coaching in the Final Four, and I'm just at home talking about it, right? So I'm not going to claim to be a better coach, but come on, man. So on the Villanova side, yeah, we're running the starters. I think at this point, Caleb Daniels at 5'7". It's a kind of a tough price for him. But the fact of the matter is he's going to play 36, 37, maybe even 38 minutes. He's going to take plenty of shots. You see in his last 2 games, he's taken 10 and 16 shots. Hasn't made a whole hell of a lot of them. He's made 7 of those 26. But the fact of the matter is he's going to be taking them, and he's going to take a high volume number of threes as well. I did talk on Thomas' show about how, Villanova and Kansas have been really good defending the three throughout the tournament, and that is something that I think Villanova is obviously going to have to do really well against Kansas in order to be able to not only keep in this game but to also win it as well. Pulling up what I have here. All right, so against Kansas we shot 3 for 21 from long range, Providence 4 for 23, Creighton was a little better, 12 for 28, and Texas Southern 3 for 14. So not a ton of success. On the other side, against Villanova, Houston 1 for 20. They fell into that trap, and they really worked themselves. Michigan 6 for 18, OSU 7 for 22, and Delaware 3 for 20. So both teams really have done a fantastic job of running each other off the three, or their opponents, I should say, off the 3-point line. That's something I think Nova's going to want to rely on more, while Kansas really can take advantage of, trying to score on the inside. Maybe they won't be able to drive as much because that Villanova defense is pretty decent itself, but there's definitely something to be said about attacking this Villanova team on the inside. They just, something we talked about in the preseason, without JRE, Jeremiah Robinson Earl, and an adequate big man replacement, they'll be able to be attacked down there in the paint. So yeah, we're looking at the starters. Caleb Daniels, I think, is kind of a strong, play in all formats. Maybe the upside is there lacking slightly. Maybe he's more of a cash play at this 5.7 price, but he's a relatively safe play. Jermaine Samuel is going to be very popular at 6'1". It's wild to say because Jermaine Samuel's been a sub 10% owned play all season long. Coming back this year after flirting with the NBA, I think a lot of us, myself included, thought that he was going to become a 35 fantasy point game scorer, be a consistent option, something that we're talking about, and that just didn't happen. However, he has flipped the switch at the right time, and in the tournament, he's played a hell of a lot better. Delaware 15-9, against OSU 17-8, against Michigan 22-7, and then against Houston, very tough Houston, 16-10. So he has been over 29 fantasy points in all 4 tournament games, playing extremely well, keeping his foul trouble at bay. That's something that we saw during the regular season, him, getting too early or 4 and just kind of struggling to stay on the court. He's been able to do that in the tournament. If that continues, I think we'll see a big score out of him. Expect him to be the highest owned Villanova player on the slate. So in cash games, single entry, stuff like that, you probably don't want to get caught with your pants down without him. But in large field, definitely want to have, some lineups without him. I have a fair share amount of him right now. I will go into my exposures at the end for those of you who are interested. But Jermaine Samuels is certainly a strong play in all formats. Colin Gillespie is going to absorb a lot of Justin Moore's shots as well, along with Caleb Daniels. It's Colin Gillespie. We know he's going to take a lot of shots. When you count him out, he's just, a clutch player. He's just kind of that next in line Villanova guard who, kind of takes over his senior year. And Gillespie, his freshman and sophomore years, he was kind of just a role player, somewhat mediocre. He played on teams with Sadiq Bey, JRE, of course, Cole Swider for a year, and just some other guys. Phil Booth was on the team when he was a sophomore, Eric Pascal. So there's some really strong players on the team and that he got to learn from. And of course, Villanova just develops well. So Gillespie is going to be out there. I do have concerns about Gillespie, ever since this year especially, he's been dealing with several injuries and just carrying the team on his back at times. But the way his knee, leg, bent back a couple of games ago there, and it looked like he might miss time as well, and he's been playing through it. I feel like watching him, he just doesn't seem to be fully healthy, not necessarily favoring the leg, but you can definitely tell he's not going to the rack with the same explosiveness. Against Houston, he looked pretty tentative to me. He only took 6 shots in there. He was trying to rely on, his free throws and stuff. He really had quite a poor game. Houston did a nice job of really kind of, keeping him from being a factor at all. And being that he's 6'5", the most expensive Villanova player, he hasn't been over 29 fantasy points in the tournament yet. 29.75 against OSU, I guess. Take it back. I definitely think that he's far from a must play. I would be very hesitant to use him in cash games. I think there's a chance, with that Kansas perimeter D, if they throw, DeJuan Harris on him, who's an excellent on-ball defender, that will be tough. Agbaji's fully capable of guarding Gillespie. Brown, certainly not Remy Martin. I wouldn't say they'd want to put him on Gillespie, but they have the guys to guard him for sure. And rolling back around to Daniels, if Harris guards Daniels, I would be worried about him getting clean looks as well. So there is a chance that these Villanova guys, even as cheap as they are, don't pan out because of that Kansas defense and how well it's played in the tournament. But at the same time, the prices on these guys are so cheap. I think even if they were to struggle, the volume would be there because they're going to play that 38 minutes. So Gillespie's probably my least favorite. Brandon Slater being my least favorite, but price-wise, all that factored in, I think Gillespie is the last guy I'm looking at, with Jermaine Samuels and Daniels kind of being the priority. And then obviously Eric Dixon, who at 4.9 is going to be just Omega owned. I would love to tell you that, we can fade Dixon and go elsewhere. If this was even a 4-game slate, I could find you a couple of leverage spots that we could feel good about, just like we did on the last 4-game slate during the Elite Eight. But we just don't have anywhere to turn here. So at 4.9, Dixon is definitely going to be your guy. You're going to end up playing 2 Villanova guys in every lineup, and you might even possibly be able to make a case for 3, possibly even 4 in your main. I don't know that they have the upside. I don't know if a 4-man Villanova stack ends up optimal in large field GPPs like the Mini Max or, the Jam or whatever they're calling it these days. I do have concerns about that, but yeah, in cash games, running there, getting that 4X from all these guys. Dixon's kind of a foul-prone guy himself. The good thing for him is he may not have to deal with McCormick or even Lightfoot because of the way that Bill Self will match small. And if they're running a lot of PNR and kind of, hanging McCormick out to dry, Dixon might end up having a much simpler defender on him. So if we can get Dixon closer to the 33-minute mark like we saw against OSU, certainly a smash play, but if he's in the mid-20s, might not be as great of a play. But like I said, this is one where I'm just not sure where else we would go. We're going to have to play some cheap guys in order to make our lineups work. You can't just go straight balanced on this one, and especially if you want to play Baycott. So 4.9 for Eric Dixon is something that you're just going to have to play. And then Brandon Slater at 4K, man, I feel really bad about Slater, even though the fact that 4K, he's going to play 36 minutes, maybe even play 40. Like that's a real possibility. I just don't feel good about him. You guys hear me mention the term non-con hero several times throughout the season. That's something that I talk about quite a bit. And that basically, especially right as the conference season starts, that just basically means a player that, beats up on some lesser tier teams, Mount St. Villanova, who they play, Mount St. Mary's, Howard, they had LaSalle, some of these teams where he had some really good games. Like Slater was out there scoring, 30, 35 fantasy points. And it was like, whoa, where'd he come from? And then the conference play started and all of a sudden, he's putting up 15, 12, 10, like, that's who Brandon Slater, that's more the speed of Brandon Slater. And in the tournament, he's been a pretty big non-factor. He's just a guy out there, soaking up minutes, playing defense to an extent. He's not giving you a lot. So I feel really quite bad about Slater at 4K in all formats. I think obviously I'll have exposure because on a 2-game slate and I'm doing 150 lineups, I'm going to splash exposure to anyone getting minutes at all just in case. But I'm not going to be going overweight. Like if he's 45% owned or some crazy number, I will certainly be well under the field on somebody like a Brandon Slater. You look at what he's done against Delaware. He should have done a lot better. He had 11 fantasy points, OSU 4, Michigan 5, Houston 10. So there's no guarantee at 4K that he even makes value of 4X, let alone a tournament 5X or more, even if he plays 38 minutes. So Brandon Slater, I'm going to be underweight on. Definitely want to have some exposure, but don't be surprised if he doesn't play great. Now, the big question is, on the bench side, we're playing for, in GPPs, we're playing for these scenarios here. Say Dixon or Slater get into foul trouble, or Samuels, anyone, doesn't matter who. They're going to have to go to Chris Archie to knock, and Archie is earlier in the season when guys were out or limited, he had a couple games like against UConn. He played 26 minutes. He had about 15 and a half fantasy points, which was fine. Played around 13 against St. John's, had about 10 fantasy points. That was fine. Like, he'll get the minutes. He had a game earlier in the season against St. Joe's, 25 minutes. He had 17 fantasy points. Like, he can definitely get the 12 and 4X at this 3K number. We just aren't certain that he's going to actually get the minutes because I don't think Jay Wright's comfortable using him very long, unless forced. And then I have seen a couple of people say, or allude to this fact, like John Rothstein has kind of hinted at it. A couple of the guys on Field of 68, which is a show for Rob Douster that I really like that network. I want to turn you guys on to that if you haven't seen Field of 68 before. Very, very good with John Fanta and the boys. Even they were alluding to, Brian Antoine being somebody who maybe, Wright has to unleash for, 14 to 15 minutes. Possible. Brian Antoine was a very highly rated recruit when he came out. He's dealt with injuries his entire career, basically. In high school, he was a total beast. Kid could really play. Like, he was expected to be a big time player. He was a 5-star coming out, New Jersey high school basketball. I was actually talking to one of my guys, Adam, in the Discord today. We were reminiscing about some old Jersey teams in the high school level. In 2017 was like Nas Reed and a couple of other guys, Daryl Banks from St. Peter's, just like some really good players. And Antoine was one that tore it up. So a 5-star, he was top 20, nationally. It just hasn't panned out for him. It's not as if he's a stiff. It's just the injuries have really kept him from amounting to much. Now, if you go back to early January when he was getting extended minutes, around 18 to 20, he had some pretty solid games. 7 points, 4 rebounds against Seton Hall for 14. Against Creighton, he had 3 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists for like 11. Against Butler in 19 minutes, he had 3 and 3 for 14. So at 3K, I think, if we can get him to 15 minutes, I think there's an opportunity there. He's not a main team play. At this point, we're just speculating because there's no guarantee. I mean, you'll look at some of the games, even when they were a little banged up or it was a bit of a blowout, he still only played like 2 or 3 minutes. So I just don't know that I believe Antoine's going to be suddenly, ripping and running. Had he been available or at a level that Jay Wright felt comfortable with, he would have already been playing him, right? So I don't subscribe to it, but I will have some exposure. Just like I said, anybody who would possibly playing some minutes, I'm going to get on board with. And unfortunately for them, Jordan Longino, who is a highly rated freshman, has been starting to get some minutes. He's hurt, not going to play. They could have really used him. I would have been all on board with using him, honestly. So looking at Villanova, any games where they were shorthanded earlier this year, there was a game against Connecticut where Justin Moore didn't play. They did win 85-74 in that game without Justin Moore, which is impressive. In that game, Jermaine Samuel had 6, 7, and 5, flirted with a triple-double there. Caleb Daniels had 16. Eric Dixon went bazooka, 24 and 12 with a block and a steal, 4 dimes. Brandon Slater had 11 and 1. Colin Gillespie had 19 and 3. Archie, that was a game where he played 26 minutes. He had 9 points, 2 rebounds, an assist, 2 steals. Very, very good for him. Longino played 7 minutes, Antoine 6. Possible for Antoine to absorb those 7, maybe push to 15. Archie may be pushing towards 20. So keep that in mind. We're looking at a 7-man rotation at best. Trey Patterson's not playing. All right, moving to the Kansas side. I like Kansas guys here. I know the prices are not ideal. They're higher. That's going to keep their ownership down. It does look like the ownership, projections and speculation for Kansas guys going to be pretty low. The only one that I see really any, if all, ownership on in cash single entry will be Jalen Wilson. And then in large field, you're looking at guys all between probably 5 to 15%. Obviously, this game, the talk of this game, Villanova versus Kansas, it's going to be a slower pace. Villanova is going to want to slow it down, milk the clock, not get into a track meet with Kansas because they'll simply get tired, gassed out, and lose. So they're going to be taking it easy. While Kansas, they're going to want to, every rebound, defensive rebound, they're going to want to push the pace and get up there and really just gas them out. So the talk is that this is going to be a lower scoring game. Ownership is going to be low. People are going to avoid. Now, the Houston-Villanova game, this is the same scenario of last Saturday, and I know the game was 50-44, and like, well, nobody did well. But, ownership was low. I was very, very high on Taz, my man Taze Moore, who I'm all enamored with. Was watching him in the dunk contest last night, doing his Vince Carter impersonation. Well above the field. I mean, a lot of the Houston guys were higher owned, which, did surprise me a little bit, but more I felt like just matched up well against Villanova because of the way he likes to play and how he, contributes in multiple categories. And he had a hell of a game. I mean, I was well over the field, like 60% compared to his like 17%. Like I went all in. And in 35 minutes, he had 15, 10 rebounds, an assist, and 3 steals. So I think we can be in a similar situation here where people are going to be lower, inclined to have lower ownership to Kansas, similar to what we saw here for Houston. I also lucked out a bit doing the 150 lineups because I had, like 12% Juwan Roberts, which ended up being really nice because Fabian White and Josh Carlton couldn't stay on the floor. So it just goes to show you, just because this is going to be a lower scoring game, you can't just simply write it off. We're not dealing with a 10, 11, 12 game slate. We're dealing with 2 games. So to simply write Kansas off, I think would be an absolute mistake. It's Kansas. They're in the Final Four for a reason. Villanova is a solid defense, but it's not as if they're going to hold them to 40 points like they did Houston. Houston just fell in this trap of, we're going to shoot a bunch of threes and try to win that way, which was totally insane for them to play that way. They went 1 for 20. That's a ball game. Still only lost by 6. Had Houston been smarter, I think they win that game in a rerun. Kansas won't play that way. I do expect Kansas to win. I do expect some guys for Kansas to come out making value. Maybe I'm wrong, but like Jalen Wilson, I think he's he's headed for 30. I think O'Shea Agbaji kind of blew the doors off finally of his ceiling. Had almost 40 last game. I think Agbaji will have another nice game here. I think that he's pushing past 30. Nobody's going to own him. I know that 7.5 is a scary price tag, but he's capable of putting up 35 in this spot. He is. I do have concerns about someone like Remy Martin. I think Remy Martin's minutes could be a little bit capped. I don't know that they'll have to use him as much because defensively he's a little bit of a liability compared to someone like DeJuan Harris, but Agbaji will be on the floor. He will be taking shots. He will be getting rebounds, stealing the ball. So I love hearing that he's going to be like 12% owned because I'll throw out 25% ownership on Agbaji. I'm not going to go crazy and run 80%. But I'll be above the field in a hell of a position, similar to what I was in Taze Moore last week. I think Brown at 7K is a little just okay. For me, it's really Wilson and Agbaji. And then if you want that value, you have Mitch Lightfoot at 3.6, kind of splitting minutes with McCormick. Maybe he sees 18 to 20 minutes. He's capable of paying that off. You have DeJuan Harris at 3.8. He's a starter. He's going to play minutes over Remy Martin because his defense is a lot better. Offensively, he's a little challenged, but he is capable of racking up steals. He can get, 4 or 5 actual points, maybe 3 or 4 assists, a couple of steals, 3.8. He's overvalued. He's got 14 fantasy points. Boom, you're off to the races. So I do like, some Harris and Lightfoot exposure. And then lastly, I do want to talk about David McCormick because I think that people are under the impression that he's going to be highly owned because he's only 5'6". I really don't agree. I think he's going to be very low owned when considering the size of the slate for 2 games. And what I mean by very low owned is like 13%, somewhere between 13 to 15%. And that makes me want to have McCormick exposure. Now, clearly he has an advantage, just like he did against Miami. I know that getting my daughter in the background screaming. So just what's going to have to happen. Against Miami, he played, like I said, just the 18 minutes, which was frustrating. But when he was on the floor, he was scoring at will. I had 15 real. So he scored 19 in 18 minutes. So over a fantasy point per minute. So the problem here is, obviously, he's going to have to split minutes with Lightfoot. If he's getting hung out to dry on pick and roll too much, Self's not going to use him. If Self can find it in his, galaxy brain mind to play him 25 minutes, I think McCormick sails over 20, sails over 23, 24, maybe even 25 fantasy points at 10%. He's only 5.6K. We're not talking about a 7K player like he normally is. He's capable of really putting on a big game against his Villanova team, and slow pace fits him, right? So if they're not going to be pushing the pace, Villanova's going to be walking the ball up or milking the clock. That's good for McCormick. If it gets into a track meet, that's bad for him. Now, I really think they can hide him on the pick and rolls and maybe kind of play like a hybrid, zone type of defense where they can get him down low and not have to move him too much. If they can figure out a way to do that and keep him on the floor offensively for over 20 minutes, he will score like another 15 real points. Like that's a real thing that's going to happen. Unfortunately, that could be wrong and they could run the fast break. He could get into a situation where he's, playing man-to-man, hung out to dry on the pick and roll, and they can only play him 13 minutes. So you don't want to use him in your main lineup, but you would be, honestly, in my mind, you would be a pretty big fool to have zero exposure to David McCormick at only 5'6". When you're dealing with a 2-game slate, he could easily put up a big score, and then suddenly it's like, why didn't I play David McCormick? If you're running 1 to 3 lineups, fine, don't use David McCormick. But if you're running 150 lineups and you don't have David McCormick on a 2-game slate, I really think you're doing things a little bit wrong here, in my mind. Not that I'm an MME expert by any means. I've just been fooling around with the 150 for the last 2 weeks. I've been doing the 20 max for a month just to practice. But that type of situation with McCormick feels like the Houston guys last week, where more, Juwan Roberts, some of these guys who, weren't that owned, they're still going to play minutes. We could get a little bit of positive variance here, and all of a sudden we've got a 30 from McCormick at 10%. So I did want to save him for the end to say that 5'6" is too cheap for him, and you want to get some exposure. Just because that Villanova interior really isn't what it was last year. I think people overvalue it a little bit, and it's just a situation where he could really dominate if given the minutes. Looking at his rates, he's got an 18% offensive rebounding rate, which is 4th best in the country, 19% defensive rebounding rate, 4% block rate. He himself is drawing 6 fouls for 40, and he has a usage rate over 25.5%. Shot rate when he's on the floor is over 22%. So he is doing things. He has over a fantasy point per minute average when he is on the floor as well. 13 minutes bad, 22-ish minutes good. So it just depends on what you think Bill Self is going to do. All right, how about, so I got Mamba here asking some questions. How about Harris Jr., Brown, and Agbaji? I don't know if you're asking me to rank them. If so, Agbaji, definitely, if you can afford him. I feel like he's going to have a big game. Players have big games in March. He's going to be low owned. I like him. I like Harris for value. Salary relief, I'm fine with. And then Brown would be last in that group. He says McCormick looks banged up at times. I don't know that he's necessarily banged up. It's literally he's incapable of stepping out on stretch bigs. He's just not quick enough. Lightfoot's not quick enough either. Both are really solid shot blockers, and they just end up splitting minutes. So you might want to just go with the cheaper one. Normally, just getting some Lightfoot exposure has been good because McCormick's 7K or whatever. But at 5'6", man, I got a strong feeling that McCormick's gonna come with it and have a nice game. At low ownership, people are writing him off. I could be totally wrong, and this is really the caveat is, if he gets 20 plus minutes, he's going to knock it out the park, but that just might not happen. All right, and he clarifies together. GPP, sure. Playing Brown and Agbaji with Harris, that's a lot of guards. I think I would probably not do that in any main lineup or even up to 5-6 lineups, but a large field GPP running a Kansas stack, which is something very few people are going to do. I certainly like that idea. Because I'm not convinced that Kansas guys aren't going to make value, even if it ends up being like a 60 to 50 game. All we need to do is look to last week's game against Houston when multiple Houston guys made value. Guys on the Villanova side, weren't as good either. You look at a 50-44 game and feel like, I dodged a bullet there, but several guys from that game actually produced pretty well. Jermaine Samuels ended up optimal. Juwan Roberts, Taze Moore. Those 3 guys all ended up optimal, and Caleb Daniels had a nice game of 12, 6, and 2. It wasn't as if he was horrible. Dixon had 9 rebounds. uglier games do lead to high fantasy scores, just not necessarily scoring. Thankfully for us in this DFS game, you can get fantasy points in more ways than just scoring. All right, so moving on to the more glamorous game, which is North Carolina versus Duke. It's truly amazing these two teams haven't faced each other in the tournament before. Honestly, I thought that was fake when I heard it. I did look it up, and it's true. But anyways, Duke, last look, it was -4. May have changed now. Over-under of 151. I do like the over 151. That is one I talked about on Thomas's betting show that I felt pretty comfortable with. These two teams have faced each other twice. Duke beat them 87-67, on Tobacco Road. Then UNC struck back with a 94-81 win in Cameron Indoor. So both own victories on each other's floor. Now we have a, neutral court meeting, the ultimate rubber match between these two teams. North Carolina has a very big opportunity to, send Coach K packing, in its final four of his career. They do this. They have the ultimate bragging rights in this big-time rivalry. Duke could come back and win a title next year, and North Carolina could still talk trash if they ended Coach K's career. And then on the other side, Duke, his kids, everybody's playing for Coach K in the honor to send him, into retirement on a high note. So this game is very high stakes, very, very high stakes. Tempo rankings, North Carolina 39th, Duke 170th. So we're going to see a lot of probably 2 Villanova and 6 player stacks from this game. I think a lot of people would prefer to just run one from the Villanova game and stack this 7, but you're not going to be able to do that because pricing is for a 2-gamer pretty reasonable. Some of the guys are priced up like Baycott and Manic. And I think that you're going to have to account for the fact that some of these guys are going to bust. I feel like a lot of the production is going to be concentrated, whether that's, Caleb Love and Manic and then Baycott underperforms, or if it's Baycott and Davis and Love underperforms. Maybe on the other side, Mark Williams getting into foul trouble and it's Banchero and Griffin. So I really feel like it's going to be, 2 players on each side that just eat all of the production, and the other guys are kind of mediocre, which I think full game stacks from this one are going to be in shambles because of it. I do, again, like the over 151. I think these two teams will play in the 160s quite easily at a pretty high rate. North Carolina, starting with them, Caleb Love, again, he was too cheap last weekend. I know he didn't have a huge game, but he's, again, pretty much too cheap again at 6'4". It's going to be really difficult for me to kind of get away from him. I think I'll have quite a bit, trying to chase that UCLA performance. He wasn't horrible against St. Peter's, 14-4-4, still pretty close to paying off that 6'5". The big thing is that he's played in the tournament 34 minutes, 32, 40, and 39. So he's not going to leave the floor. North Carolina, another team, actually all 4 teams in this Final Four rely on their bench the least amount of pretty much any Final Four we've seen in a long time. They're all 4 rank in the bottom 250 to 300s for bench minutes, which kind of, speaks to the fact that you don't necessarily need a lot of depth. And that's just, if your starters can stay on the floor, they're productive, you don't get into a lot of foul trouble. Because I do personally think depth is important. We talk about it all the time throughout the season. But as you get into the tournament, your rotation has to really kind of tighten. I think the sweet spot's probably a 7-man rotation. North Carolina right now really doesn't even have that, bench-wise. And at this point, you guys know who their starters are. Caleb Love, Brady Manic, RJ Davis, Leaky Black, Armando. And then they'll use Puff Johnson for a few minutes off the bench. Occasionally, Dontrez Styles will come in and play. Kerwin Walton, who was more of a factor last year, doesn't really play. They have some guys who are going, like DeMarco Dunn, that are going to be factors next year, and they're pretty highly ranked recruits. They're just super raw. And it'll be interested to see how North Carolina shakes out and the transfer portal and everything once they're done, or if they win the title or whatever, and who leaves and who stays and all that. But I think really they're going to run their 5 guys, 35 plus minutes, just like Nova. And we'll see probably 8 to 9 minutes from Puff Johnson. And that might be it. We might see Dontrez Styles play 2 minutes to give, guys a quick water break, but that's going to be it. unless Bacot picks up like 3 first fouls or something. So you can confidently use these guys. I do have questions about what Armando's ownership might end up being. Everybody on the slate's relatively cheap, easy to fit, but Armando comes in at 8-9. You don't have a lot of value here. The Villanova cheapies, unless you're going to take shots with Harris or Lightfoot, fitting Bacot might not be the easiest thing to do. It is going to be difficult to justify fading him even at the 8-9. You look at it in the tournament, he really only had foul trouble against Baylor, and that was only late. Like, that game went overtime, so he played 40 minutes, and the fouls didn't start coming till much later, so it wasn't even really that much foul trouble for him. But 28 minutes against Marquette, 40 against Baylor, there was overtime. UCLA 31, and then St. Peter's 35. And St. Peter's, he just went nuts. Now you look at what he's been doing, double doubles, like just every single game. The last time he didn't have a double, funny enough, was against Duke back on March 5th, and they did win 94-81. He had 23.7 rebounds and 2 blocks. Very nice game for him. Now you go back and look at the game they lost against Duke on their home floor by 20. He did play 30 minutes, 12 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block for 26 fantasy points. That would clearly be a disaster if he could only muster 25 to 26 fantasy points. If he's able to get closer to the mid-30s, 39 like he had against last time, then you're feeling pretty damn good about his almost 9K price point. I do think you can get away from him just because the matchup against Mark Williams, sort of negates each other. It's going to come down to, who can get who into foul trouble there. But that's going to be a really fun battle to watch between two of the, the best bigs in the country right now, at least the collegiate level, and seeing who is able to, overcome the other. I do think that Caleb Love is my primary play from North Carolina, and then I'm probably trying to fit Bacot, and then it's a decision between, Brady Manek 7-3 or RJ Davis at 6-6. I think most people would probably go Manek. He's having a hell of a tournament. Against Marquette, he put up 53 fantasy points, against Baylor 37, UCLA a little quieter at 28, and then St. Peter's another 32. So pretty solid bet. He's going to continue to put up 30 just because he's playing the entire game. Manek has transformed from this kind of, hang around the perimeter and spotty shooter at Oklahoma to just an absolute terror in all facets of the game, knocking down clutch threes, voluminous type shooter, getting rebounds at a high level, blocking shots. I don't know what it is about players leaving Oklahoma, but my God, between him and Alondas Williams this year, I don't know what they were being suppressed in Oklahoma or what, but as soon as they left the Sooners, they both became monsters. I mean, Alondas Williams winning the ACC Player of the Year is still can't wrap my mind around that. Looking back at what Manek did against Duke the last time they played, 20-11 for 45. They don't really have anyone to guard him because of the way he can play inside and out. With that being said, he also can't guard anyone on Duke. His limitations on defense have really cost the team at times, and it's been a really solid DVP spot to target. Anyone who is being guarded by Manek has been putting up a really high fantasy total. So you can look at him and whoever he's going to be guarding, which I'll get into in a second when I talk about Duke. And the first time against Duke in 35 minutes, he had 21-6 for 31 fantasy points. So I think he's getting 30. I think you can go ahead and lock in 30 at Manek, for Manek. And I think that might mean that if you're running multiple lineups, you might want to be above the field. You may want to go ahead and pencil him in for like a 60% ownership, because I just don't see him failing at this price. I think he's minimum going to be walking away with 30, 31, and there's upside for more. He could put up 50. This game could go to triple overtime. There could be a lot of fantasy points scored here. I think there will be a lot of fantasy points scored here. So I'm pretty high on Manek. Panic for Manek is something I used to say during his Sooners days when he would have really quite bad games. And it was a joke at that point, but man, I can't believe the corner he's turned. And then I like RJ Davis as kind of the pivot. I think he's probably going to be the least owned of the primary 4. Not counting Leaky Black here in the starting 5, but just, the 4 you think of for the offense. And RJ Davis has shown, like against Baylor, he scored 30 real. He's capable of doing that. He's going to take double-digit shots. He's going to contribute in, multiple categories, stealing, rebounds, assists. Like, he's going to do it all. 6'6", a pretty fair price for him. but he's a little less consistent. It's kind of the name of the North Carolina guards, with consistency not being there. Looking at what he did against Duke last time out, he put up 40 against them, 21, 5, and 4. Very, very nice game. First time around, he had 20 against them, 11, 2, and 2. So I'm fine with it, man. I think if you really, it's going to be hard to fit like Bacot, Love, and then Manic. I think that's tough. And then go over and get Paolo and another Duke guy. So you're probably going to have to do something like, if you go Bacot and Love, you'll probably have to then take Leaky if you want a third North Carolina, or you can skip Bacot, go Manic, Davis, and Love if you think Bacot's going to struggle with Mark Williams. So it's really going to depend on how you want to build your lineup and what you trust more. For me, I really like the Manic Caleb Love pairing. I think those two together is a very solid source of fantasy points. I think both are going to put up 30 plus. I'm a little higher on Caleb Love than most, I think. I've had a lot of faith in him. Back in a few months ago when North Carolina fans were calling on him to leave the program and transfer. And I said, shit, I'd love to have him in Washington, for the purple and gold. Like, I'll take Caleb Love. I got no issue with Caleb Love. So I'm happy to see him kind of crush right now. And I think he's going to put up a big game here against Duke. And then Leaky Black at 5K. If he's going to be significantly lower owned than Eric Dixon, I have quite a bit of interest there, as not only just a straight pivot, but also maybe pairing the two together. And that prevents me from having to dip down, and take a bunch of Lightfoot and a bunch of Harris. Cause I'm not trying to have 60% DeJuan Harris just to fit the rest of my lineup. I'm happy with 20% DeJuan Harris. Because I don't think he's hitting a big number that often. You're just using him as a salary saver. There's not enough payups on this slate to really make it worth it. So Leaky Black together with Eric Dixon feels like a pretty strong move. Played 37 minutes in their win against Duke. He had 6, 5, and 3, which put him right around 19 fantasy points. That would get it done. That would be fine. We obviously want more. The first time against Duke, he had 18 as well, 4, 6, and 2. It's not going to be a big score, but he's going to get steals, rebounds. He's going to contribute in enough categories to really get close to the 4X number. And he's going to play, the entire game. So I got no issue with Leaky. Leaky with Dixon, I think, is fine. It's a lot less upside probably than going with a Harris or a Slater and then another pay up. But I think, if you're looking for safety and you value and build and landmines with that, then I think you should definitely have exposure to the more safer yet maybe less upside pairing of the Dixon Leaky Black duo. And then at near min price 3-1, Puff Johnson. Really, if we can get him to 15 minutes, I think that he's worth a gander. 5% ownership maybe from your exposures. He's there, he's going to be their primary sub. If anyone gets into foul trouble, he's going to be out there. So definitely don't mind him. Yeah. All right. And then on the Duke side, really, Paolo seems pretty damn obvious at 8K, right? If anyone on the slate that is the least likely to actually bust, and that meaning 20, putting up a 20 or something like that, Paolo is the guy. If I had to bet my soul, I shouldn't even do this because I'm setting myself up to fail. My soul, my car, my house, whatever, on a player to not be below 30, I'm picking Paolo here. He hasn't been the biggest high upside guy this season. He's not spiking 50s, but he's certainly not detonating, your lineups and torpedoing you to the point where he's putting up a 22. It's 32, it's 34, it's 36, 35, 38, 38, 38, 38. I mean, he's just churning out these mid 30 scores so confidently and so consistently that, you're going to want Apollo's definitely going to be my highest exposed player in the 150. He's going to be highly owned. We're talking, 60, 65% owned, most likely. And the high dollar, even more, 80%. So he is the primary number one Duke play. Not telling you anything you don't already know. If you've been grinding away, Paolo, get him in there. So that's going to affect, if you play Bacot, Manic, who else you get there. Mark Williams at 7-4. I think people are going to get cute here and talk themselves into a Mark Williams fade. I love Mark Williams. I have liked him a lot this year. He's kind of like McCormick in the way that early in the year, Coach K was, screwing with his minutes. There'd be some foul trouble, but then, he'd play Theo John more, or Bates Jones would get minutes, Joey Baker, and it'd be like, why is Mark Williams playing 14 minutes and he only has 2 fouls? Because he's putting up like 23 in that 14 minutes. And then you'd see him get a 27-minute game against Miami, spikes at 35. 27 minutes against NC State, he spikes a 55. Then he plays 19 minutes against Virginia only, and he puts up 30. Like, give this man 35 minutes. He can handle it. You saw it against Arkansas, 35. Saw it against Texas Tech, 30. Saw it against MSU, 30. Against Fullerton, 32. Like, if he continues to see over 30 minutes, he's only 7-4. His price is only 7-4, and he's been mid-8s. Like, I don't know how anyone could talk themselves into a fade of Mark Williams at 7-4 if he's going, and I don't have a time machine to tell you my flux capacitor is in the shop right now. If he plays 35 minutes like he did against Arkansas, he's putting up 40. He's putting up 40. Come on. 26 minutes last time against North Carolina in a loss. He shot 8 for 11. He had 13 rebounds against Baycott, 16 and 13 for 33. I know 33 is like, well, that's not a slate breaking score, but if you have your lineup filled out with a bunch of 33 and 35 and 38s, like, Mark Williams is going to end up on optimal. Now, if he gets into foul trouble or something happens, Coach K has an aneurysm or something and plays him 19 minutes, then, yeah, we've got issues. But he's only 7-4. Like, is it really that much of a decision? He was 8-5 earlier this year. And I remember using him at 8-5 and hating myself because it was against Miami. And he had 10 rebounds, but he just couldn't score. He wouldn't shoot the ball, and he only had 27. I remember really hating myself for that. But 8-5, and now we're looking at 7-4 for a player capable of spiking a 50. I mean, I don't know, man. Looking at his first game against North Carolina in 26 minutes, 16 and oh no, that was the second game. Sorry. In the first game in 25 minutes, he had 9, 6, and 2 for 24 fantasy points. So a little bit tougher of a game there for him the first time in a win, interestingly enough, and then the loss he was much better. So really depends, man. There's going to be foul trouble. One of Armando or Mark are going to get into foul trouble like that. That's just going to happen. That's a fact. Bo Borowski has been invited to be a ref for the Final Four. I'm not sure which game he's doing yet. That might be out there. I'll tweet it out when I figure it out later. But the refs in this tournament feel like we're there to see them. We're tuning in. We're showing up to the game to see them, and they're really taking over some of these games. So I could see this being a little bit of a ref show early on, which means one of Armando Baycott or Mark Williams is getting into foul trouble. Now, Mark Williams' fouls called rate is 3.4 per 40 this year, which isn't horrible. He was over 4 last year, so he's improved there. He is drawing only 3 fouls per 40, so I have less worry about Armando Baycott getting into foul trouble because I just don't think Mark's going to be that one that draws the fouls. It's not as if Mark Williams is operating in the post as a primary, option. He's getting a lot of his work off of putbacks or transition dunks. Like, he's not necessarily operating as a guy like Baycott's being featured on offense a lot. They're getting the ball down low and letting him work. And you can tell that because Baycott draws over 5 fouls per 40, number 4 in all of the ACC at 5.1. His fouls called rate is the lowest of his career at 3.4 after being 4.2 and 3.9. So, if I had to say, if I had to pick, I would say Baycott's got a better chance of getting Mark Williams into foul trouble. But really, it could go either way. And especially if you subscribe to the fact that Duke is being not necessarily, I don't want to say the refs are cheating. I don't believe that to be happening. But Duke may be being pushed along a little bit. They may be given a little bit additional calls at time. The free throw disparity might be a little wider than you would expect it to be. And we could see some ticky-tack foul stuff going on where Baycott ends up picking up a second that is, Chet Holmgren-esque, somebody running into him and they tag him with a second. If that happens, Mark Williams is going to go absolutely batshit crazy. So it's really a race to see which big, who can get that big into foul trouble first. So I'm a big fan of Mark Williams. I like him at that price. I think anything over 28 minutes, Mark Williams is just going to destroy. He has the second best offensive rating in the country. He has a combined rebounding rate well over 30%, a block rate well over 11%. His 2-point field goals, he's shooting 72%. He's taking 1 3. So he's basically shooting 71% from the field. His free throws is 75%. So he's a 7-footer who you can't hack a shack him. If you foul him and send him to line, he's going to knock down 2. So Mark Williams is my guy. You won't be able to fit Paolo, Mark, Bob Baycott, Manic, Glove. I mean, you can, let me rephrase that, but you're going to have 2 or 3 other spots that are you're throwing in a prayer on Theo John or something like that. A competitive lineup, you're probably not going to have those 5. But now that I just challenge you, go out and run those 5 and see if it wins. AJ Griffin, I feel pretty good about AJ Griffin. I think that the price of 5.4 is extremely cheap for him. That works for my type of build. He's only 400 more than Leaky Black, who we know is going to have to get his fantasy points from, secondary and, ancillary slates or stats. Sorry. So at 5.4, I feel like that's a pretty good spot to target him. I think, points props, which I'll talk about in a second, I'd be focusing on 3-point props, anything, 1.5 set for him. I like the over on that. 3 of the 4 tournament games, he's hit 2 or more threes. He has scored 24 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games. The second time against UNC, he did struggle with his shot a little bit. He didn't take a ton. He had 15 fantasy points, so certainly a concern. And in the first game against them, he just went completely bonkers. Took 17 shots, 27 real, 4 rebounds, 35.5 fantasy points. Kind of a little bit of a breakout game for him. He had a really nice game against Louisville right before that, but really that North Carolina game was kind of like, okay, this kid's arrived. So I do like him. Especially if he's going to be on the lower owned side of these Duke guys. Because I feel like most people are going to be stacking North Carolina, right? Like Duke prices seem more in line with where maybe they should be, except for Paulo and Mark to me feel low priced, where Wendell Moore and Jeremy Roach, feel pretty much where they should be. So I'm wondering if people are going to go the North Carolina side. And as much as I'm a certified, bona fide, player haters ball, I go there and talk smack about Duke. I hate Duke type of guy. I'm going to be using a lot of Duke on this slate, I think, because especially at loanership, if that's even possible. We'll just have to see. I'm still kind of messing with it, but I feel like Paulo, Mark, and Griffin, I'm going to have a lot of exposure to. Wendell Moore is more of like a 15 to 20% exposed guy for me. 6'8". They use Wendell Moore as the guard or the offensive initiator throughout the season. They don't really have a true point guard. So basically Wendell Moore was just dribbling the ball up. So you can call him the guard, I guess. He has fallen off hard. Against Fullerton, he looked good. MSU, he's okay with 27. He's kind of fallen off against Tech and Arkansas, 2 tougher matchups. This is Wendell Moore. The course of his career, he'll throw up a 50 and then he'll follow it up with a 12. He's done this for 3 years now. So the 6.8 price might look appealing, appetizing, advantageous, whatever word you want to use. Just know there's a lot of risk with Wendell Moore, and I could see him actually struggling quite a bit here, or deferring, or simply just putting up like 25, like he did against North Carolina last time they played. He had 34 the first time against them, but things have changed. Griffin has emerged since that time. Roach has, taken more of the touches and the initiation of the offense from Moore. So I'm just a little bit leery about using him. He's probably the least preferred option for me on the Blue Devils. Jeremy Roach, I think, is fine at 5.3. Price is probably like where it should be at this point on him, 5.3, 5.4. Gonna play the mid-30s minutes. I'll have some exposure, but the upside is kind of zapped away at this point. He's not that 4.6, 4.8 guy anymore, but he is going to have plenty of opportunities to rack up assists because of what he's going to be doing with the offense. I do like the idea of being above field on Trevor Keels at 4.7. Keels started off this season, really hot, very consistent, popping these big scores, and then kind of fell off when Coach K, especially as the tournament started, needed somebody of type of veteran presence, which he doesn't really have, but Roach is the veteran, turned the reins over to him and bench Keels. And we've seen the minutes have been fine, 21, 25, 14, and 25, but He just hasn't done a whole lot with them. 2 of the 3 games, he's taken 8+ shots, though, which is encouraging to see. Now he's low enough at 4-7 to really kind of, take a look at. Keels is a guy that, he's going to need a big performance to really solidify his draft stock. It does sound like he's going to be, all the Duke guys are going to be first-round picks, except for Roach. It sounds like, obviously, Paolo, Mark Williams, can solidify his lotto spot with a big game, which is kind of another reason I like Mark. Wendell Moore is probably getting drafted in the mid to late first. Griffin is projecting as a top 10 right now on mocks that I've seen. And then Keels is still getting first-round love, even though, he's been mediocre to below average. And that just shows you the NBA, mantra of high potential. Like Shaedon Sharpe, who didn't even play a game for Kentucky, he's projected to be a lotto pick. If he were to come back to play college ball next year, he'd probably tank his stock just because they'd be able to see more of him. So I hate the way NBA goes, but that's the way it is. So Keels is probably not coming back to college. So we can use that if you like narratives and say, Keels could use a big game to really, hammer home that first round, stock. And I think they're going to need some timely shots from him. I actually do feel kind of comfortable using Trevor Keels and being above field. Now, that doesn't mean, 50% Trevor Keels, but I'm comfortable playing, 15 to 25% of him when I feel like the rest of the field's not going to be using him. At 6'6", he's an absolute easy 100% fade like he was to start this tournament. But now we're talking about 4.7, which is pretty much the cheapest I think he's ever been. He may have started off around 5K at the beginning of the season. I can't quite remember that. But at 4.7, he's worth a shot at 25 minutes. All it takes is one of, Roach, Griffin, Moore to get into foul trouble, and suddenly Keels is on the floor for 30 minutes. Another team that doesn't use their benches very much, they'll go 6 deep, and they'll play Theo John, they'll 7 deep, they'll play Theo John 5 minutes, right? And that's about it. Joey Baker and Bates Jones really aren't getting any minutes to speak of. So you're really going to limit yourself on Duke guys to that 6-7 man rotation. If you're running the 150 lineups, throw 1 or 2 out on Theo John. That's how I've been playing these 2 game slates. That's how I got Juwan Roberts, because he's going to get some minutes. Or if you think Mark Williams is going to get into foul trouble, then maybe Theo John plays 15 to 18 minutes. He's only 3'4". He's a shot blocker. If you remember his days at Marquette, So rankings wise, Paulo easy for me. Right after that, it's Mark Williams, AJ Griffin, Roach, and then Keels, and then Moore. Moore's last for me. So expect Wendell Moore to go for 50 because I said that. All right. So let's talk core. First for FanDuel. So FanDuel core, Paulo Banchero, easy. Eric Dixon, easy, really cheap. And then on FanDuel, David McCormick's under 5K. So on FanDuel especially, I'll be running much heavier David McCormick. For me, a sub 5K David McCormick on FanDuel is way too juicy to avoid. And then my DraftKings core is Paulo, Eric Dixon, and then I'm probably a little different here, Caleb Love. I just feel like it's Caleb Love's, really his not coming out party, but his kind of like FU tournament to all the people that, the naysayers, the haters, the people that wanted him to leave the program. And this is really just been a very beautiful way for him to kind of take this year, come back, improve his draft stock and play lights out. So I think we're going to see a game from Caleb Love that is much more reminiscent of how he played against UCLA. Not necessarily saying he's going to put up 30 plus, real points, but I do think we see him eclipse 20 real. And any, secondary stats he can add on top of that is just going to be icing on the cake, but he's way too cheap. So that's my 3-man core there. My top pay up, and that's anybody over 7.5 on this slate, is going to be Paulo. I know that's very easy. My top mid-range guy, so that's 5.5 to 7.4. It's Caleb Love. Again, very easy. I'll throw out the core, though, and say instead of Caleb Love, I'll say after him, it's Jalen Wilson. I feel very, very confident in Jalen Wilson. If I can't get confident with McCormick because of the minutes, Wilson I can. I think he can exploit Villanova for the same reason I think McCormick can. Wilson's quicker on his feet, though. He can defend, better lateral movement, and he's going to play more minutes. So don't sleep on Jalen Wilson, who projects to be pretty low owned as well. Even if he's 25% owned on a 2-game slate, that's a massive edge if he pops a 35, which he definitely can, and he can put up more. fouls could be a risk with him as well. And then my favorite value, and that's just, obviously 3K to 5.4 is the range I like to use. I'm not going to say Eric Dixon because that's what everybody would say. I think I'm going to select, go a little off the wall here and take somebody else. And it's going to be AJ Griffin, who I'm much more confident in him than I think the rest of the field is. I think he's going to take a ton of shots here. I think he profiles really well. I think he is going to end up being the one that is actually guarded by Brady Manick, and maybe that's wishful thinking on my part, but if AJ Griffin's the one guarded by Manick, he is going to have an absolute field day. Running him off screens. If he gets any bit of daylight out behind the perimeter, he's going to let it fly. I expect 12 plus shots out of him. If we can get him to 45% from the field, then add some other stats, get to the foul line, he's due a very, very big game. I think we see him put up 30 plus here. If Duke is to win this game, I think it'll obviously Paolo big game. But I think AJ Griffin will be a guy that has a monster, and I could see AJ Griffin actually leading the team in scoring. So that's my top value there. PrizePicks. Let's talk PrizePicks. So there's quite a bit. Let me pull up the board and make sure, because some of the ones I posted in my write-up may not be available anymore. The first couple, like Caleb Love over 25.3 fantasy points, like I really like that. AJ Griffin over 20.8 fantasy points, I really like that. Eric Dixon over 18.7 fantasy points, that feels pretty low. There's a chance he could go under that because of fouls, but just on volume alone and playing that many minutes, like that's a pretty easy one. I like Caleb Daniels over 12.5 real points. He's going to take a ton of shots. He's going to have to be so involved in the offense. So that's one that I favor. Let's see, what are some other ones that I wrote up? Jalen Wilson over 7.5 rebounds. I feel pretty confident that he is going to get a lot of boards. And then Ochai Agbaji over 27.2 fantasy points. I mean, I like O'Shea for 30, right? I think that he's going to hit that. So let's see what they got. They have, so PrizePicks has given 25% off. They do the specials here. Remy Martin, whose points were 11.5, they're taking the 26% off. Sorry. They're making his real points 8.5. So I'd hit that over. I think Remy's not going to be used as much for this game. / borderline might struggle, but 8.5 real points, like let him knock down a couple threes, maybe 3 threes, a couple free throws, and he'll get there. So I'll take advantage of the 26% off and add that to some of my plays. I will be loading the PrizePicks tracker later tonight. I already have some in there. Plug in my computer. And I'll just, load a couple like flex plays, power plays, 3-4 man guys, and he'll be in a couple. What else did I like? There was some others. Leaky Black, 4.5 points is pretty tempting. I don't know if I'll actually take it, but it's tempting. AJ Griffin over 11.5 real points. I'm on that AJ Griffin train. I could definitely be wrong, but I feel fairly good about him making that happen. Let's see, 3 points made. No, there was one more that I felt really good about. Eric Dixon. So not only his fantasy points, but his real points are only 7.5. There's not like 100% guarantee he's going to get 8 real, but 7.5 for a team that's going to play 5, maybe 6 guys. That's just too low. So I'll hit the over on that. Bunch of overs. Let me give you some unders, because unders are always a fun sweat, right? There are. So I like Remy Martin's under 19.5 PRA, and that's only because I don't think he's going to play as much as he's been playing, and I don't think he's going to do anything besides score. With the PRA, I don't have to worry about his steals anyway, so under 19.5 PRA if you're looking for something to beef up, maybe a flex play, or give yourself a 5 picker to try to hit. I like that under on him. That's pretty much it. There'll be some others that I talk about in the Discord, but I don't need to give you the entire board. Jermaine Samuels is kind of interesting because of how he's been playing. If you think he's going to continue to play well, over 30 fantasy points for him, or the real of 14.5, but I could take it or leave it with those numbers, honestly. All right, let me pull up my bet tracker because I have some player props that I felt pretty good about that I loaded the other day, actually. So let's talk about those. Do you, Martin? I don't know. No, I don't. I don't know what you're asking. Do I, Martin? But I'll have exposure. That's what you're asking. Okay. So Jalen Wilson rebounds prop over on DraftKings was 7.5. I like the over there. I just feel pretty good about him. AJ Griffin's 3 points made was 1.5. I like the over there. It's minus 165, so it's not as if we're getting amazing value, but just something that if you want to, roll a couple props or maybe even, run a parlay. I usually like to run even if they're, minus up to minus 200. So I like to run several different props and just outrun it. Caleb Daniels over 1.5 3-pointers made. It was minus 200, so that one you might want to look at, parlaying with something else. Like Caleb Daniels over 1.5 3-pointers, and what was it? Armando Bacot over 12.5 rebounds. That was one that I had parlayed together. I feel like Bacot's going to hit over that. He's going to get 14 or 15 at minimum. Just like on PrizePicks, AJ Griffin over 11.5 points, one of my favorite props, and Caleb Daniels over 12.5. So PrizePicks mirrored a lot of the props that I'm running. I also like Caleb Love in this game so much. I took his over 2.5 threes. That's plus 100. So you're getting some nice value there if you think he's going to be, hitting his shots. The volume's going to be there. We know that. I think he gets hot similar to like what he did against UCLA. And I think he's going to hit, 3 or 4 triples. So plus 100, getting that nice value, maybe parlaying that with the Caleb Daniels 3-point, which was minus 200, getting yourself, some pretty decent odds on that one. And then if you want at minus 110, if you're thinking David McCormick's going to play, 25 minutes over 6.5 rebounds, is it a little risky? Perhaps, but minus 110 is decent enough odds for me to try. Let's see what else they've added for that while we're hanging out. If there's quite a few of you watching live, I appreciate that. Make sure you smash that like button for me. I guarantee you'll have good dreams if you do and win lots of money, but it helps me out, so please do. While we're waiting, let me pull up some more props, see what they've added or if anything's changed. So Eric Dixon, 8.5 points on DK at minus 120 seems pretty advantageous. I like the 7.5 on PrizePicks better, but I mean we think he's probably going to score, right? Let's see. RJ Davis over 13.5 real points is minus 105. I kind of like that. They do have leading scorer of the game for the Villanova versus Kansas. If you like a fun one, they've added Jermaine Samuel is plus 400. If you think that he's going to be the top scorer, that one's interesting. Also, Caleb Daniels at plus 800. I think it's going to be one of Daniels or Samuels that does lead the game in scoring. So you take one of those guys. They have a daily scoring leader for the entire Final Four, which is kind of neat. Caleb Love at plus 700, Jermaine Samuels at plus 1,200, and let's see, Caleb Daniels at plus 3,000. So if you think Caleb Daniels is going to be the highest scorer of the day, plus 3,000. It's a pretty fun one. I'm definitely going to be hitting some of those. And then the North Carolina Duke high score, some of the odds here. Caleb Love at plus 550, Manic at plus 600, AJ Griffin at plus 1,000. That's some nice value. Like, I don't know. I'm banging this AJ Griffin drum. I could be way wrong, but I think AJ Griffin's going to have a big game. So some nice value here if you can access the player props here on DraftKings. They've got quite a few neat things going on. All right. So that's about it, guys. We're just a little bit over an hour. As I said, expect a championship show either Sunday night or perhaps Monday during the day. I'm going to try and get a guest or two on that one. And then I'll be transitioning a little bit, just doing some more on the sports media side in terms of, getting some guests, doing some interviews. I have reached out to several players and a coach. There is one player in particular that said he would be willing to come on, so I'm excited about that. I don't want to announce it because I don't want to jinx it, so still working on it, see if it works out. And then also kind of transitioning into other niche stuff like WNBA. Mr. Gross from the FTN, he's really involved in women's sports, which is awesome. He grinds WNBA, so maybe there's some kind of avenue for both of us to kind of do, some content together. But either way, I'm going to be still churning out shows. I'll have previews for college football throughout the summer, starting to preview conferences, teams, get you guys ready for CFB DFS. And then I'm going to do some shows throughout dedicated to the transfer portal. I'll also have an Excel document with the comings and goings of the different teams, players, stuff like that. So if you guys are interested in that, hit me up when it's done. I'll post it and pin it to my Twitter so you guys have access to all of that. So just because the season's ending doesn't mean I won't be active and around and grinding whatever niche sport that I can find and still talking about college sports, because the grind never stops and we never really sleep, not even in May. So best of luck to everyone. Let's win lots of money. Check out the Discord, although it's less active now because, of course, there's not a lot of injuries to grind or last minute news, so it should be okay on that front. But yeah, check out the Discord on FTN Daily. We'll be talking strategy in there, last minute questions, tilting the games, and then, like I said, we'll be back Sunday night with the championship show. Appreciate it, guys. Best of luck and take care.